"Restricted zone. You don't belong here, lady." The first words cracked across the construction site like a gunshot. It was 9:12 a.m. The sun was climbing, throwing hard light against steel beams and scaffolding. But the heat in the air didn't come from the weather. It came from the voice of Sergeant Cole, flanked by two other uniformed officers. Their boots stamped on the gravel as if the ground itself was theirs to claim. Workers froze. Hammers paused mid-swing. A crane operator leaned out of his cabin to look down. Conversations died, leaving only the metallic hum of machines cooling in silence. The tension was sudden, total, like someone had pressed pause on the entire site. In the center of it all stood a woman. White shirt tucked neatly into dark jeans, yellow safety helmet, gloves dangling from one hand, and a rolled set of blueprints in the other. No entourage, no expensive jewelry, no security detail. She looked like any other supervisor here to check progress, but her stillness cut sharper than the officer's command. The lead officer stepped closer, jaw tight, hand hovering near his holster. "Show me your ID, now. This isn't your place." The words carried more than authority. They carried dismissal. They carried contempt. For a moment, she didn't move. She didn't even blink. Her calm wasn't passivity, it was pressure, building second by second. Around them, workers exchanged uneasy looks. A young engineer near the scaffolding muttered under his breath, "Why are they hassling her? She just walked in." Oh, the officers weren't listening. Another one, broader, sneered. "People try this scam all the time. Flash a fake badge. Walk where they don't belong. Not today." The woman let the words hang. Then, with deliberate slowness, she slipped her gloves into her pocket, freeing her hands. The blueprint remained in her grip, steady. Her eyes met theirs without flinching. The silence was heavier than shouting. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Thank you very much." Now, back to her. The officers didn't know her name yet. They didn't know that the ground under their boots wasn't city property at all, it belonged to the very woman they were trying to erase. And in less than 30 minutes, they would know exactly who they had crossed. The gravel crunched beneath her boots as she took a slow step forward. No rush, no panic, just deliberate calm. She was here for a reason, and not the one they assumed. Her name was Maya Ellison, 42, daughter of a teacher and a postal worker. She had walked onto this site with nothing more than blueprints and a hard hat because she had promised herself years ago that no title, no amount of wealth, would ever make her forget the dignity of showing up as herself. On paper, she was CEO of Ellison Global Developments, a company worth more than most city budgets. In reality, at this exact moment, she looked like a woman who didn't belong, and that was the point. She came without an entourage, without luxury cars or flashing badges. To the officers, she was just another black woman in jeans on a construction site. The irony? This restricted zone they were so protective of was hers. Every beam, every poured foundation, every bolt of steel, it was all under her ownership. She had signed the contracts, financed the loans, and negotiated the permits. But none of that mattered to the men with badges standing in front of her. One officer narrowed his eyes at the rolled papers in her hand. "Where'd you steal those?" he said, voice dripping with contempt. The question wasn't about documents. It was about existence. It was about whether a woman like Maya could ever be more than an intruder in their eyes. A few workers exchanged glances. One of them, a young Latina architect named Rosa, whispered to her colleague, "That's not stolen. That's the master plan set." Her voice trembled because she knew what was happening, but feared what speaking louder might cost her. Maya heard it. She always heard the quiet voices in the room, the ones silenced first when power was abused. She thought back to when she was 25. Fresh out of grad school, wearing her only suit, she walked into a city office to file permits for her very first project. The clerk looked her up and down and said, "You're in the wrong line. Contractors use the back door." She never forgot the sting of that sentence. She never forgot the way the back door smelled dust, paint, and old cigarettes. It was the smell of being dismissed. And now, almost 2 decades later, it was here again. different uniforms. Same dismissal. Sergeant Cole stepped closer, shadow cutting across her face. "Listen carefully," he barked. "Trespassing on city property is an arrestable offense. You got 5 seconds to show ID, or you're in cuffs." A murmur rippled through the workers. Someone muttered, "This doesn't feel right." Another pulled out a phone, screen glowing red as it began recording. The tension wasn't private anymore. It was public. Witnesses were multiplying by the minute. Maya didn't move, didn't flinch. She adjusted her grip on the blueprints, as if they were more than paper, like they were evidence, like they were her anchor. Her silence said what words couldn't. "I know exactly who I am. Do you?" The silence cracked when the second officer, lean with a sharp jaw, stepped forward. His hand tapped against the grip of his holstered weapon, not pulling it, just letting the gesture hang in the air like a threat. "Lady, let me spell it out," he sneered. "You're trespassing. No ID? No badge? That blueprint is probably pulled from Google. You've got 2 options. Walk yourself out or let us drag you." The words stung, not because they were true, but because she had heard them before in other forms. Maya's calm didn't break. She stood anchored, helmet gleaming in the morning sun like a crown she hadn't asked for but carried nonetheless. Around them, the construction site shifted uneasily. A hammer clanged against concrete as a worker lost his grip. A crane engine coughed and went silent. Conversations swelled in murmurs. People weren't just watching anymore, they were bearing witness. Rosa, the young architect, whispered again, louder this time. "She's not trespassing. I saw her name on the project roster." The officers ignored her, but others heard. A pipe fitter nearby lowered his gloves, muttering, "That's the boss, isn't it? Why are they talking to her like that?" The youngest officer, maybe mid-20s, seemed unsettled. He shifted his weight, eyes darting to his sergeant. But authority was a current, and he was caught in its flow. Sergeant Cole smirked, voice sharp as gravel. "You're not fooling anyone. People like you show up, pretend to belong, and then cry victim when security calls your bluff." He leaned closer, his badge flashing against the light. "But I'm not buying it." The phrase hung there. "People like you." Maya's jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she slowly unrolled the blueprint, laying the paper across a steel beam beside her. The wind tugged at the edges, but her hand pinned it down. Lines of architecture stretched across the page, measurements, elevations, stamped approvals. It was the future of the site, drawn in ink and verified by the city itself. The crowd stirred. A foreman stepped forward a half pace, then stopped himself, unsure if speaking would cost him his job. His hesitation said everything. Fear had been the silent partner of prejudice for far too long. A flash of red caught Maya's eye, someone's phone camera. Keith, a young project manager, was recording openly now. His voice carried, not whispering but steady. "This is wrong. She's got the plans. She's supposed to be here." Sergeant Cole barked back, "Put that phone down. Interfering with police orders is an offense." Keith didn't budge. His lens stayed up, capturing every word, every gesture. Others began to lift their phones too, timid at first, then bolder. The scene wasn't private anymore. It was a stage, and the officers were on it, whether they wanted to be or not. Maya remained still, eyes locked forward. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The storm hadn't peaked yet. She would let them tighten the noose with their own words. Because she knew, the tighter it got, the harder it would snap back when the truth broke free. The hum of silence broke again. Not from the officers this time, but from the edges of the crowd. A voice, shaky yet brave, rose above the low rumble of whispers. "This is foul," Rosa said, her arms crossed, eyes locked on the officers. "She is not trespassing. She is leading this project." Her words cracked the tension like glass. Dozens of heads turned toward her. Some workers nodded quietly, others looked down, torn between truth and fear. One of the officers scoffed, stepping toward Rosa with a smirk. "Watch yourself. Interfering can cost you more than your job." His tone was casual, but the threat underneath it was sharp. Before Rosa could answer, another voice joined in. Keith, still holding his phone, spoke louder than before. "She asked for proof. She showed the plans. And you are still calling her a fraud? What does that tell us? The sergeant's face tightened. It tells you to stand down, kid, or you will regret it. The moment stretched. Cameras were up. Eyes were on them. What had started as an accusation against one woman was becoming something larger. A chorus of murmurs echoed. She belongs here. Why are they treating her like this? Maya finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but every syllable cut through the noise like steel against stone. You do not get to erase me. Not here. Not today. The words were not loud, but the silence that followed made them thunder. For a second, even the officers hesitated. Their authority, once unchallenged, now felt brittle under the weight of witness voices. The young officer shifted again, his discomfort now visible. His eyes darted between Maya and the sergeant as if silently asking, "Is this really what we are doing?" The sergeant doubled down, raising his voice so the entire site could hear. "You are a liar. You are a trespasser. And in about 5 seconds, you will be in handcuffs." The crowd reacted. Rosa stepped fully out from behind the scaffolding, no longer whispering but shouting, "She is the one who signs our checks." Gasps followed. Some workers clapped. Others began calling out in support. Then, an older worker with a weathered face stepped forward. His voice carried the weight of decades on construction sites. "I have seen her here before. She has been here since the foundation was poured. You are the ones out of place, not her." A murmur rolled through the crowd like a rising tide. Someone shouted, "Let her speak." Another added, "She owns this." Phones multiplied in the air, little red lights blinking, broadcasting the moment beyond the steel and dust of the site. The officers looked around and saw not just one woman, but an entire workforce turning into witnesses. Their authority no longer felt solid. It felt like sand slipping underfoot. Maya stood tall, eyes steady. She did not need to shout. The witnesses were finding their voices for her. Every word, every recording, every gaze was evidence. And the officers did not even realize they were writing their own downfall in real time. The tension should have broken, but it did not. The sergeant was not finished. He grabbed the radio clipped to his vest and barked, "Command, this is Sergeant Cole. Bring the captain down here. We have a hostile on site." The word hostile rolled across the construction site like smoke. It was not just a label. It was a weapon. The workers shifted uneasily. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered in low tones. Phones caught the moment, recording every syllable. Rosa gasped. Keith shook his head, muttering, "He just called her hostile. Unreal." Minutes later, the crunch of heavy boots echoed across the gravel. Another figure appeared at the edge of the crowd. Captain Harris. Broad shoulders, stiff posture, a face carved with years of authority. His uniform was pressed sharp, his eyes cold and dismissive. He carried himself like he owned the ground beneath his feet. "What is going on here?" Harris demanded, his voice low but commanding. Cole gestured toward Maya with an accusatory hand. "Trespasser, sir. Claims she belongs here. Workers are confused. She is stirring up a crowd." Harris's gaze fell on Maya. He scanned her helmet, her jeans. The blueprint still spread across the beam. His eyes narrowed, not with curiosity but with judgment already decided. "This is your leader?" he asked the workers, tone dripping with disdain. "Dressed like that? Carrying scraps of paper?" The insult landed heavy. Gasps broke the silence. Rosa clenched her fists. Keith raised his phone higher, voice cracking but strong. "She is the one paying for all this steel you are standing on." Harris ignored him. He stepped closer to Maya, lowering his voice but making sure the crowd could hear. "Let me explain something. Construction sites attract all kinds of people looking for a handout. People who do not know their place." He paused, letting the words hang like a noose. "You do not belong here." The phrase was sharper this time, deliberate, like a verdict. Maya's eyes held steady. The insult was not new. She had heard variations of it since she was a teenager. She remembered being 16, standing in a bank lobby with her mother, overhearing a teller whisper, "They are in the wrong building." She remembered the sting of being escorted outside as if she were a trespasser in a place she was invited to. That memory lived inside her bones. It did not weaken her. It forged her. Now, standing in the dust and steel of her own project, she faced the same dismissal. The difference was the witnesses, the phones, the crowd. The silence that once buried her was now breaking open. Her silence held, but she was not alone in it. The workers filled it for her. "She belongs here more than you do," someone shouted from the back. "Check the permits," another yelled, holding up a printed roster from the site office. "Her name is on every page." The tide was turning. Harris's face tightened. Authority was slipping. Control was eroding. But pride is a dangerous thing. He raised his chin, doubling down, clinging to a power that was already dissolving. "Last chance, lady," Harris declared, voice ringing against steel beams and scaffolding. "Walk out now, or we remove you by force." The words fell like a countdown. But what Harris did not know, what none of them knew, was that the countdown was not for Maya. It was for them. The storm was about to break. The blueprint lay torn across the steel beam, its edges fluttering in the morning wind like a wounded flag. A uniformed hand had ripped it only moments earlier, the sound of paper tearing sharper than any shout. Captain Harris stood over it, arms folded, expression carved in arrogance. "Enough games," he said coldly. "You are done here." The sergeant pulled a pair of cuffs from his belt, metal glinting under the Sunday. The crowd stirred, gasps and whispers breaking into full voices. "They cannot do this," Rosa cried, her voice breaking but strong. Keith shouted, "She owns this site. Everyone knows it." The officers ignored them. The cuffs dangled in the air, a symbol meant to humiliate. Maya did not move. She looked at the torn paper, then at the officers, and finally at the dozens of phones raised high. Every lens captured the moment. Every second was already being broadcast beyond the dust and gravel of the site. Her voice came low, steady, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "You are making a mistake that cannot be undone," the sergeant sneered. "That is what they all say." He took a step closer. Maya raised her phone to her ear. She spoke clearly, deliberately, so that every microphone, every camera, and every witness could hear. "Activate internal protocol. Record from this moment forward. Escalate to legal." On the other end, a crisp voice responded instantly. "Logged. Timestamped. Systems are live." The sergeant hesitated for the first time. His grip on the cuffs faltered. Harris barked, "Do it! Do not let her play this game." The crowd shifted. Workers moved subtly, closing ranks around Maya. Rosa stepped in front of her, defiant. "You will not touch her." Harris's face twisted. "You think a phone call makes you untouchable? You think these people can protect you? This is law enforcement. We decide who stays and who goes." Maya's gaze was unshaken. "No, you decided to overreach, and you did it on my ground." The words sent a shiver through the crowd. Some clapped, others shouted encouragement. The atmosphere shifted from fear to defiance. Keith spoke directly into his camera. "You are watching this live. They tried to handcuff the owner of this entire project, and she is standing her ground." The sergeant's jaw tightened. He shoved the cuffs back into his belt but stepped closer, trying to reclaim power. "Phone calls do not scare me." "Died." Maya's eyes did not waver. She replied, calm but final, "It is not the phone call that should scare you. It is the truth." Her assistant's voice came again through the speaker, louder this time. "Maya, legal is patched in. City Hall is aware. All footage is secured." Gasps rippled through the workers. Phones captured every word. Harris's eyes darted from Maya to the crowd, realizing too late that control had slipped beyond his reach. Maya took one step forward, standing tall in the dust and steel, and declared, "You wanted to put me in handcuffs, but you have already chained yourselves to the consequences." The site erupted in applause, not just noise, but a wall of sound. The balance of power had shifted. The officers had crossed a line, and now there was no way back. The sound of clapping rolled across the site, but Maya lifted her hand, and the crowd quieted. She had not raised her voice yet. She did not need to. Her helmet gleamed beneath the sun like a crown she had earned, not inherited. She stepped forward, past Rosa, past Keith, past the barrier of workers who had begun to shield her. Every eye followed her. Every phone tracked her. She faced Captain Harris and Sergeant Cole directly. Their uniforms carried weight, but not enough to silence what came next. "You think this is your ground?" Maya said, steady and unshaken. "You think your badges give you the right to strip dignity from anyone who does not fit your picture. But here is the truth. She pointed at the torn blueprint lying across the steel beam. These plans were signed under my authority. This land was purchased under my name. Every bolt of steel, every slab of concrete, every paycheck handed out on this site flows from my company, from me. Gasps spread through the workers. Phones trembled as people adjusted their grip, desperate not to miss a single frame. Harris shook his head, scoffing. "That is impossible. Someone like you—" "Finish that sentence," Maya cut in, sharp as a blade. "Go on. Tell them what you mean when you say someone like me." The captain's mouth clamped shut, words choking before they escaped. Maya's voice carried now, not a shout, but a force. "I am Maya Ellison, Chief Executive Officer of Ellison Global Developments, the owner of this site, the employer of every person standing behind me, and the woman you just tried to put in handcuffs." The silence that followed was not quiet, it was charged. Like the moment before, a storm breaks. Workers erupted, their voices colliding into cheers and shouts. "She is the CEO!" Rosa cried. Keith turned his phone toward the crowd, narrating for thousands now watching live. "You heard it. She just revealed it. She owns this site." Phones dinged with notifications as streams multiplied, clips spreading faster than the dust in the air. The officers froze. Harris's face drained of color. Cole's jaw hung open. The young officer took a step back, shaking his head as if trying to dislodge himself from the reality closing in. Maya did not flinch. She walked to the steel beam, lifted the torn blueprint, and held it high. "You called this paper scraps, but it is proof. Proof that your arrogance blinded you. Proof that I belong here more than you ever did." A foreman near the scaffolding shouted, "That is our boss." Another worker raised his helmet in the air. Applause thundered, echoing off steel and stone. Maya lowered the blueprint, her gaze fixed on Harris. "You thought you had authority, but you only had the illusion of it. The real authority stands here, and it does not wear a badge. It builds the future." The crowd roared again. For the first time, the officers looked small, swallowed by the scale of their mistake. And in that moment, the balance of power did not just shift, it broke. The echo of Maya's declaration still hung in the air when the first cracks appeared in the officers' composure. Captain Harris opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. His face, once carved in control, now looked brittle, like glass about to fracture. Sergeant Cole's jaw was clenched so tight it trembled. The youngest officer had already stepped back, eyes wide, his grip loosening on the radio at his shoulder. The workers were not silent anymore. They surged forward, not in violence, but in unity. Helmets raised, voices rising, phones held higher than ever. The air buzzed with cheers, shouts, and the constant chime of live-stream notifications. Keith's voice narrated over the noise. "Thousands are watching. This is real." The police tried to arrest the CEO of her own project. His feed filled with comments flying faster than he could read them. "Unbelievable. Stay strong. The world is watching." Rosa moved closer to Maya, standing at her side. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. "I saw your name on every document. I knew it. They treated you like a stranger, but you are the foundation here." Maya placed a hand lightly on Rosa's shoulder, a gesture of calm. Then she turned back toward the officers. "You wanted to define me as hostile. You wanted to strip me of dignity. But now the truth is louder than your accusations." The sergeant snapped back, desperate to salvage control. "Do not listen to her. She is lying. She staged this." His words rang hollow, bouncing off the steel with no weight. A foreman barked from the crowd. "Staged? She pays us. Her name is on every paycheck." Another worker lifted a printed permit, waving it like a flag. "Her signature is here. This whole project has her stamp." Harris's authority collapsed further. He glanced at the phones, at the workers, at the sea of eyes and lenses capturing his every twitch. He had no script for this. Maya's assistant's voice echoed once more through her phone speaker. "Maya, the stream has reached national outlets. Legal confirms footage is archived in multiple locations. Nothing can be erased." Gasps spread again. The officers were cornered not by walls but by truth. Every step they had taken had been logged, every insult amplified. The young officer finally spoke, his voice low, almost swallowed by the noise. Captain, she is telling the truth. I checked the roster this morning. Her name is there. His admission sent another wave through the crowd. Workers cheered, shouting, "Even he admits it." Harris turned on him, fury in his eyes, but the damage was done. His own team had cracked. Maya stepped forward, steady, composed, her silence stretching until the noise dulled enough for her words. "You wanted to erase me. Instead, you exposed yourselves. The world is watching not my shame, but your downfall." The crowd roared, phones swaying like torches in the dust-choked light. Harris and Cole stood paralyzed, stripped of the power they once wielded. And in that moment, the site did not feel like a construction zone anymore. It felt like a courtroom, and judgment had already been delivered. The roar of the workers still echoed when Maya raised her hand. The crowd quieted, the silence heavy, waiting for her next move. She pressed a single button on her phone. The line was still open to her assistant. Her voice was calm, but each word struck like a verdict. "Begin immediate action. File complaint against Captain Harris and Sergeant Cole. Suspend their authority on this site. Notify City Hall and our legal division. Effective now." Her assistant's response was crisp, audible through the speaker. "Understood. Processing. Their access credentials are being revoked." At once, a small but piercing sound cut through the air. Cole's radio emitted a sharp beep, followed by silence. He lifted it, shook it, pressed buttons. Nothing. Harris tapped his earpiece, but the channel was dead. Their link to command had gone dark. Gasps rose from the workers. Phones captured every second, lenses zooming in on the officer's confusion. Keith shouted into his stream, "Their radios just shut down. She pulled their access in real time." The comments flooded faster than ever. Power. This is justice. They underestimated the wrong woman. Harris's face flushed crimson. "You think this proves anything? You are playing a dangerous game." Maya stepped closer, her presence steady as stone. "This is not a game. This is accountability. You tried to strip me of dignity. Now you stand stripped of authority." Cole snarled, "You cannot do this. We are law enforcement." Her gaze did not waver. "And I am the law here. This ground belongs to me. This project is under my authority. You had power until the moment you abused it. Now it is gone." The youngest officer backed away, hands raised slightly, shaking his head. "She is right. We cannot stop this." His voice cracked, but it carried. The crowd heard. The live stream heard. Rosa lifted her phone high, her voice fierce. "We are all witnesses. You cannot erase this." The workers cheered again, louder this time, filling the site with a sound that drowned out any last shred of defiance. Maya's assistant spoke once more through the speaker. "Confirmation. Their names are flagged. Reports have been filed with oversight. City officials have been alerted." Harris's composure collapsed. He grabbed at his badge as if holding it tighter would restore his control. But even the metal in his hand seemed smaller now, diminished in the face of truth. Maya's voice cut clean through the chaos. "You entered this site believing you could decide who belonged. You ended up proving who never should have been here." Her words struck harder than any command. The officers stood frozen, their power stripped in full view of the people they had tried to intimidate. The crowd was no longer restless. It was resolute. Workers clapped, shouted, raised helmets and phones high. The construction site was no longer a battleground of intimidation. It had become a monument to justice. And at its center stood Maya Ellison, not shouting, not shaking, but steady, silent, unbroken. The reckoning had arrived. The construction site was no longer noise and chaos. It was order born out of truth. The officers stood in silence, stripped of authority, their radios dead, their badges nothing more than metal pinned to shame. Maya did not gloat. She did not raise her arms in triumph. She simply stepped forward, standing where everyone could see her clearly, and spoke with the same calm that had carried her through every insult, every dismissal. "You thought silence meant weakness," she said, her voice carrying over the hum of phones still streaming. "But silence can be power. It can be the anchor before the storm. And when the storm breaks, no lie can stand against it." She lifted the torn blueprint once again, smoothing it against the steel beam. The paper was damaged, but the design was still clear. "This," she continued, "is not just lines on paper. It is a future being built by hands that deserve respect. Every worker here, every voice that spoke truth today. You belong to this future, and no one has the right to tell you otherwise." The crowd erupted in cheers, not just for her but for themselves. For Rosa, who spoke first. For Keith, who filmed. For the quiet workers who had finally stepped forward. Maya looked back at Harris and Cole, her gaze unflinching. "You tried to erase me in my own house. You tried to humiliate me on my own ground. But I did not need to fight you with anger. I only needed to reveal who I am. That was enough to dismantle everything you tried to build against me." Harris's lips parted as if to protest, but no words came. Cole stared at the gravel, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The youngest officer had already turned away, ashamed, distancing himself from the wreckage of their arrogance. Maya turned her attention back to the workers. "I do not need to post this clip. I do not need to defend myself online, because the truth is already here, with you. You lived it. You recorded it. You carried justice into the light." Her assistant's voice broke in once more through the phone, audible for all to hear. "Reports filed. Oversight confirmed. Media has picked up the story." Maya nodded once, then placed her phone back into her pocket. She let the weight of her next words settle into the dust and steal around them. "I do not need to tell the world who I am," she said slowly. "The world just watched you prove it for me." The applause that followed was not polite. It was thunderous. Workers raised helmets high. Phones swayed in the air. The live stream feeds filled with comments of awe, outrage, and inspiration. Maya bent down, picked up the last piece of the torn blueprint, and pressed it against the others. The paper crinkled, but the lines of the design aligned once more. She held it in her hands like a promise. "You cannot tear down what was built on truth," she declared. "Not with paper, not with words, not with prejudice. Because truth does not break, it endures." The workers roared again, a sound that echoed across steel beams and scaffolding. The officers, once towering figures, now looked small, swallowed by the enormity of their failure. Maya stood at the center of it all, calm, steady, unshaken. Her final words landed with the weight of judgment itself. "I am not the victim of your story. I am the conclusion of it." The screen faded to black. And across the silence, a single line appeared. "Dignity is power. Justice needs no shouting, only truth."